Okay, I'm going to tell you a story about my friend Eddie. Now, Eddie died a couple years ago, like, I think like 3 years, maybe close to 4 years ago. And he died, I think he was 94, 95 years old. And I'd kind of known him my whole life. He was a friend of my grandfather. We didn't hit it off too well for some reason. It always kind of freaked me out a little. But after he was close with my grandfather right up until he died. And we had some minor arguments or something like that. Like I said, he's always been around. He'd always been around me, but didn't quite hit it off till after my grandfather died. He used to spend time with my grandfather. So when my grandfather was gone, he'd start coming around the business and hanging out and this kind of thing. And I kind of got to know him then. And he was a real character. And what he did is he's got kind of an interesting story. He was being 94, 95 years old. He'd been around a long time. And he used to sit out at our place drinking beers. And he was born in like 1900 and something, but he was around before cars. And his family, what they did for a living is they hauled coal in the wintertime and ice in the summertime, door to door to homes. He was born and raised in New Hampshire. And New Hampshire is pretty much, it was in the United States, but they were French speaking. And he didn't speak English until he was 12 years old. He used to laugh. He said, I'm a citizen, but I didn't even speak the language for his 12 years of my life. But he spoke pretty good French. And being from New Hampshire, he was an ice skater. And I can't remember how old he was, but him and some buddies do a lot of ice skating. And they were doing these backflips. And there was, I can't for the life of me think of the group. There's a group that would go from all over the world and all over the U.S. that was a skating team, you go pay money, go watch them do their skating thing. And I can't think of the name. It just escapes me. But yeah, it's a world famous team. Everybody knows it. And they found him doing these backflips. And him and these two other buddies that were skaters, they were the first people at the time to do like a double or triple backflip or something like that. And so they skated with this group for many years all over the world, skated for the Queen and the presidents and all this kind of stuff. So he had all kinds of great stories of that. But I bring this up because I think of the last little history video I did. He remembers. He was my I call him my connection to the past historically. My first or second person connection to like the 1800s, let's say. And what I mean by that is he remembers his dad telling him the story of one day when he woke up, got the newspaper, opened the newspaper, or he looked at his newspaper, and on the cover, Custer had been killed. And so his dad was alive when Custer lost his butt, and that's how old my friend was. But he used to tell stories and stuff like that. It's like, man, he wasn't around, but when Custer was killed, but his dad was. I mean, shoot, that's about as old west as you get. But the one thing I learned about this guy, and he always talked about being that old, getting to 94 or 95, and he said the disadvantage of it. And he was a very happy guy, great personality. He was like an 18-year-old man in a 90-year-old body. I mean, this guy, you really had to keep an eye on him. Flirting with the girls and all this kind of stuff. But he'd always said that the big disadvantage of being that old was seeing all your family members die. He lost 2 sons. He outlived his sons, and he said that's, no parent should have to do that. But he had an excellent memory, even at 95. There was things I told him 10 years prior that I had forgotten about, and he would tell me verbatim what I told him. And so I really had to be careful. If I made him a promise or something like that, I really had to make sure I came through, because he would not forget. He was kind of a crazy driver, and so we had to keep an eye on him in that respect. He drove right up until 93 years old. Occasionally you wouldn't see him for a couple of days. And what he'd do is he'd get up across town somewhere and forget how to get home, and he'd be stuck in his car for a day or two. He'd go to McDonald's and eat and just stay in his car. And we finally talked him into getting a phone, and so people could hunt him down. He says, well, I'm at McDonald's somewhere. And he'd go to all the McDonald's, and finally you'd find him and get him come back home. But he was driving. He really shouldn't have been driving. But one funny thing is one night he's out in front of our shop, and a lot of people knew him. They come by and visit him. He knew all kinds of people. And he's out there. He bummed a cigarette off of another customer, and he's smoking a cigarette. And this one lady comes up and says, Eddie, my gosh, what are you doing? He says, what do you mean? She says, that's not healthy, you smoking a cigarette. He said, for Pete's sakes, I'm 94. What am I saving up for? She didn't have an answer. He said, well, what do I live healthy so I can live to be 94? She says, I'm already 94. What do I get? He'd drink beer, and, we wouldn't let him have more than 2 beers, so he'd try to drive home. But just a funny guy. The reason I bring him up is just I used to like stories about the Old West and all that kind of stuff. And the fact that his dad was walking around and, during Custer. But every now and then we talk about politics, or, he was a patriotic kind of guy, but, we talk about us as United States and how peace-loving people we are. And he would go back to the beginning and name off all the wars and all the conflicts. He says, yeah, we're just peace-loving people. But pretty good guy, pretty good. There's not a lot of those guys around anymore. Tell you all kinds of stories. But the guy was around before cars. He realized he knew when cars came on the scene, this guy could tell you what it was like. And that's kind of a mind blower. When a guy says, we was riding a big Percheron horse days before, hauling this stuff around. Next thing you know, we got a truck. And I always thought that was pretty interesting. But yeah, that was my friend Eddie, professional skater. I think he broke every bone in his body. Was a drinker, was a partier, but lived to be 95. Even smoked part of his life. What the heck, But some guys just got the constitution. But like I said, the hard thing he said for him, he used to come out to my place where I work, and he'd say, oh man, he says, you won't believe what happened to me today. I said, what, Eddie, what happened? He says, I woke up. He always said, he goes, he wanted to live to be 90. And after that, he was just waiting. He goes, I'm tired of this. I'm going to wrap this thing up. And then he finally got his wish. So it all worked out for him in the end. Anyway, that's my friend Eddie.